So our first presentation today and the main presentation for our webinar will be by Gemma Lamp on social media and online tools in science. So Gemma's a PhD student at LaTrobe University, and she's also a newly appointed social media officer for the Society. So Gemma has quite a long history already in working with social media in science. So she's been a social media representative for the Australasian Cognitive Neuroscience Society since 2017, and has also run programs teaching LaTrobe researchers about how to enhance their research impact with online mediums, and has also given similar presentations at various different institutes around Australia. So it's with great pleasure that I hand over to Gemma. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so that we can get hers up. And yeah, very much look forward to what promises to be an excellent presentation. Thanks, Gemma.
Thank you. And thanks so much, everyone, for having me. I'm a bit excited. I've loved that I've been able to join ABSS this year. So I've only got an hour and I've got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to jump straight in. But the main focus for today that I want to talk about is how to use these online mediums for communication and connecting with your research community. So let's make sure this is working first. Beautiful. So when it comes to the online tools that are available, there's a lot out there. You'll see a lot of these common themes come up, common icons you're probably very familiar with. It's easy to get a bit inundated when looking at all the different options out there. So I often get people saying it's so overwhelming, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all of these different things. Today, my aim is I'm going to touch on a few of them, but if you walk away with some new skills in any platforms, hopefully you have a look at why Twitter and Slack are two really important platforms for science communication, but also have a look at how you can use Google Scholar and Altmetrics to just help measure how well you are communicating your research as well. So I'll touch on all of these different things, and hopefully by the end of today, you'll now feel a bit more confident and know which platforms you want to utilize and how. When I talk about these things and when I do these presentations, I often get asked the same questions about every different platform. So I'm asked, do I need to download another app? How much time do I need to put into this? What am I going to get out of it? And what about my privacy? And I think these are the common things and concerns that people have about these. So I'll try to answer each of these questions for each of the platforms that I'm talking about today as well. So first up, Facebook. I'll touch on this one briefly. Facebook can be used for science communication. However, I feel that while it is probably the most user-friendly and the one that we're the most familiar with, there's some things you need to keep in mind if you are going to use it, which primarily for me, a lot of us have had Facebook for a very long time and it's our personal space. I would highly recommend having a distinction and having a professional account that you're going to use if you are going to use it for science communication purposes. I think the best things to use Facebook for in terms of science is keeping track of events and joining research groups. So there's a lot of great groups that you can connect with, and I get a lot of information from these, and these are some that I highly recommend. But I would say that that is about the extent of using Facebook, aside from if you are looking to recruit from the general public or from specific groups. Facebook can be good for that because it is very popular as well. Do you have to download another app? No, but it does work a lot easier if you're using it on your phone. However, you can just use it on the web interface. It's entirely up to you how much time you want to dedicate to Facebook. And the number one thing that you're going to get out of it will be connection. In terms of privacy, like I said, this is the one that I would be most concerned about privacy-wise, because you do want to have a clear separation between pages that you might keep for your photos of what you're doing on the weekend, things like that, and the person that you want to present professionally. Instagram is another one that a lot of people are very familiar with, and this is one that I think can be used pretty well for science communication, but depending on what your needs are. Because it's a visual platform, it's really good for visual sciences. So for example, neuroimaging or anything where you have great visual outputs, this is really good for that. It can be nice to do it behind the scenes. Now, in terms of, I think most people here today will be working with some type of brain stimulation, and sometimes that can be a nice thing to have a platform to show what that actually involves. It's good to engage with the general community to show what you're doing your research on, sorry. And it's good to engage with other research groups that are doing similar things. There are some great Instagram accounts out there, and it can be beneficial if you're trying to connect with a community beyond just researchers. Do you need to download another app? Yes. You can use Instagram on a web interface. However, it is designed to work on your phone, and it is best to run on your phone. If you want to have a research Instagram account, you need to keep it active. You need to dedicate at least 10 minutes a day for you to keep your content up to date and to keep interacting with your followers. You'll get communication and contact with the general community out of using Instagram. And again, you want to keep whatever Instagram page you put out there, you want that to be your professional page that you use specifically for that. No pictures of your puppies, even though they might be adorable. You've got to keep it strictly to your research. Moving on to ResearchGate, which a lot of you will be familiar with. ResearchGate is like an online CV. And this is really specific to people who work in research because it allows you to keep track of your research and also keep track of other people's research. It can give you citation metrics, so telling you whether people are using your research in their research. And it also gives you a research score of how people are interacting with your research. It's a nice, easy platform for researchers to see what you are doing, and it's really good for promoting your academic output. So anything academic, ResearchGate is really nice to use for that. I'll give you an example of myself. So I do have my ResearchGate pretty up to date. However, my primary use of ResearchGate, and you can tell by this breakdown in my score, is that I use it for my publications. So I keep this up to date so people can see what my publications are out there, and people can request to get full text if it's not an open access journal, for example. One thing before I move on that I want to point out is in a lot of these things you'll see me sharing, I'll have a consistent photo. I like to keep my photos consistent across different platforms, and I also like to use professional photos. Now, that might seem silly, but one thing that I highly recommend for academics is to get a professional photo taken, not just to have one, a selfie you've taken in the bathroom or something. It's the person you want to present, basically. So look into your university or the institute that you work at, see if they offer any academic photo shoots and invest in a nice photo. It's becoming more and more common, especially conferences, things like that, asking for photos. So to have one that you know is good to go, I highly recommend. Now, I'm a PhD student, so I don't have a lot of research output, obviously, yet. So my score is fairly low, but if we look at someone who's a bit more established, someone you might recognize from ABSS, you'll see that their score is a lot higher, but a lot of people are using ResearchGate in the same way. So if you look at the breakdown, again, it's more about sharing your publications and sharing your research CV, I call it. So what you've achieved so far in research. You don't need to download another app for this one. You can just use the website. It's entirely up to you how much time you dedicate to this. Some people do like to use it to follow other researchers. I mostly keep mine up to date, particularly in terms of looking for new work. So it's like an online way to track my work and to track other people's work. And again, as long as you keep this professional, it's a professional page, there's no real concerns about privacy with this one. Now, LinkedIn is similar, but not specific to research. So a lot of people use LinkedIn as, like I said, an online CV. However, LinkedIn is not about your academic outputs, but more your employment history. I get a lot of people asking me about the benefits of using LinkedIn, especially in science. I don't think, it doesn't seem to have huge impact when sharing academic output. However, having an up-to-date LinkedIn is beneficial when you are looking for work. It's also really nice if you are looking at making a transition from a purely academic career pathway. If you were looking to industry or clinical work, things like that, that's where LinkedIn really does help. If people have other suggestions of ways to use LinkedIn, I'd love to hear it. But for me, it's more about promoting what else you've achieved. So not just your publications, but what are your other experiences? What are your other skills that you have to offer future employers? So for example, these are just some parts of my LinkedIn. I've got my research experience up there, my education, and it has a nice little thing where other people who are similarly skilled or more skilled than you can endorse whether you know these things. So for example, the head of school at my university endorses that I know neuroscience, which is great because that's what I'm doing my PhD in. And one of my supervisors has endorsed that I know science. So it's a way of having almost like an online reference as well, that people can say, yes, she is who she says she is. Do you need to have an app for this? No, you can use it via the website, or you can use it via an app. Again, I think it's primarily useful when you're looking for work and to use it like a CV. But again, in terms of privacy, you do want to keep it professional. Keep it about the person that you want to put out there and show off to prospective employers. Now I'm getting into the more nitty-gritty ones that I want to talk about. So first of all is Google Scholar, which I'm sure majority of you are very familiar with. And Google Scholar is a great database for us searching for academic articles, but also it's important to keep profiles up to date. So you as a researcher can have a Google Scholar profile that will track your publications in addition to your citation indices. So it's nice to keep this up to date. It's really well automated, so it'll automatically update your citations and when you get new publications. And it's really nice for not only to highlight your research output and citation indices, but to also see other people's. So to give you an example of what it looks like, this is my Google Scholar profile. Gives you a breakdown. Usually it lists your publications in order of how many citations they've attracted. You can keep your contact details there, what your research interests are. It tracks your citation over the years and these indices here. Again, I'm a PhD student, but looking at someone a bit more established that you're familiar with, as your career gets more established, you will get a higher record like similar to this. And again, if we compare how Peter is using his Google Scholar profile, it's quite similar where he's keeping it up to date with his research interests and he can keep a track of these indices as well. Now, when I talk about these indices, especially if you're more earlier in your career, you might look at this and say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. So just a quick little intro. An I-10 index is the number of papers that you have that have more than 10 citations. And an H index is a way of measuring how many highly cited papers you have compared to how many publications you have overall. These are just ways of showing that your research is attracting interest. So people are interested in what you're doing and people are using your research in other ways. You do not need an app for this. It's all entirely online. You don't need to dedicate a lot of time to this. It's just as you need it. And it's a great way of keeping track of your citations and publications. No privacy issues that I'm aware of because you do want your publications to be out there. Now, another way of looking at your research impact is to look at altmetrics. And this face is usually the face I get when I talk about altmetrics, but it's a different way. So there's on one hand, you can say my research is making an impact because these other researchers are using it in their work and citing it. But an altmetric is a way of looking at other ways your research is making an impact. So This colourful donut is broken down into different websites and online mediums that are looking at and citing, talking about your research. So it can be media, it can be Twitter, different online websites, Wikipedia, anything. It also gives you this number in the middle is a score where it takes into consideration how many different people are talking about it, how many different types of medium are talking about it. So you can't just sit there on Twitter and retweet about your paper over and over again. That's not going to make a difference. You need to score, you need to have different people talking about it on different platforms to get a better attention score like this. So I'll show you a few examples of why it's important to consider altmetrics as well. First of all, I'll show you one of my papers that I published about 1.5 years ago. So in 1.5 years, this paper has attracted 5 citations, which as a junior researcher, that's all right. But I want to see what else is going on with this paper. So if I was to go to the website, I can see that there's been over 3,000 views of my paper. So clearly it's attracting some type of interest. So if I was to look at the altmetrics of it, I get this blue circle here and the number 18. The reason my circle is blue is because my paper is only really making an impact on Twitter. If I have a look through this, I can see, all right, so 29 different users and there's been 37 tweets about my paper. It's primarily retweets and there's some original things, but I can see that while I don't have a lot of citations, people must be interested in this because they're talking about it online and it's not just me sitting there tweeting about my own paper. Another really great example, which is really relevant for all of you, is this is a new paper that's only just recently come out in the last few weeks. You'll probably know some familiar faces with this paper. So this is obviously something that's incredibly relevant and it's very new, it's just for now. So there's no citations on this paper yet. However, it's something that I'm sure many people are talking about. So if we were to look at the altmetrics of this, in just a few weeks, it's already got a higher altmetric score than my paper that's been online for 1.5 years. And we have more than one platform. So not only are people tweeting about this paper, which is usually a starting point for altmetrics, but it's been highlighted on a research platform. And we can see this here, that it's a recommendation. So someone has recommended that people read this paper. We can also break it down and see, okay, who in the world is looking at this? And we can see that it's got a lot of interest all around the world. And it's not just scientists. We've got members of the public, doctors, science communicators, all sorts of people are interested in this type of paper. So I think it's a nice balance if you want to talk about whether people are interested in your research and thinking about applying for grants in the future, or even just talking about your research to prospective employers. It's a nice balance to have both citation industries and altmetrics. For this one, you don't need an app. However, some journals will have a way to automatically calculate your altmetrics and some do not. So if you are looking at a paper that doesn't have the altmetrics, you can actually download a little toolbar app that you can click and that'll calculate the altmetrics for you. You only need the time that you're looking at these. So if you want to calculate your altmetrics, that's the only time that you need this. And it's just a way to measure your impact outside of just purely looking at citations. And again, no privacy issues. These are your publications that are out there anyway. Now, I want to spend a bit more time talking about Twitter, as Twitter is something that I feel is incredibly important and incredibly relevant for researchers. So we'll look at this one in a little bit more detail than the others. So Twitter is an ideal platform for science communication, specifically connecting to other researchers, but also with the wider community. You can not only share your research outputs, but you can extend their reach way more than you could traditionally. And you can also network with researchers and other people who might be interested in what you're researching. For me, I've been on Twitter for about 4 years now. I've had some amazing experiences, not only finding research papers that I wouldn't have found using other means, but I've also been able to connect with researchers that have helped my career. I, for example, had an experience early in my PhD where I'd collected a specific type of data and I couldn't analyze it. I didn't have any help in my research community at my uni. I didn't have anyone who knew this stuff. So I looked up a researcher who had published a paper on this. I found their Twitter account, sent them a message and said, hey, I have this data set. I don't know what to do. Any advice? And this person actually helped me hugely, to the point that it shaped how I went on in my PhD. So it's a platform where, you know, a few years ago, we only could rely on people in our immediate research field, whereas now we can reach out to the whole world and find people who are experts. So it's given us a lot more power in how we conduct research. And I find that Twitter is the science community for that type of thing. So you can keep track of what other people are publishing. If you have someone that you regularly read a lot of their articles, you can follow them on Twitter if they have a Twitter account, and you can be the first to know when they're tweeting about their research. You can keep track of job postings or call for abstracts from either conferences or special issues of journals, things you might like to contribute to, maybe special committees you might like to be on, or opportunities to review papers. You can network with researchers that you could potentially collaborate with. And like I said, you can ask for help from other researchers as well. To have a successful Twitter account, you do want to have an audience. It's not the end of the world if you only have 30 followers. But if you do want to increase how many people are following you, make sure you're increasing real followers. And the way to do that is, firstly, who you follow. So first, you want to think, who are the people that you want to connect with, that you want to share your research world with? So I would recommend looking at, for example, conferences like ABSS, or research groups that you're interested in. Look up journals that you regularly read or have published in, or other researchers that you do want to network with. If you work in a specific area and you want to connect with people who know about this area, then look up specific groups. So for example, if you're in stroke research, look up stroke groups, Australian or international. The next step is to engage. There's nothing worse than an unpopulated Twitter account that's not really doing anything. So you want to be tweeting, you want to be following people and following their tweets, and not just, you know, occasionally putting a like out here, but actually have a conversation. So it's not just about, here's all of my information. You want to have conversations with people and interact with people as well. In terms of what type of things that you want to post and what things will capture attention, at the end of the day, humans are very visual creatures. We do like something that will capture our visual attention. It's in an informal space, so you can have a bit of a sense of humor. And I often like in using a GIF here, or, you know, a funny picture there. Also using links. So if you link to the website or the journal article or whatever it is that you want to talk about, that's really important as well, because it means that not only is it, for example, increasing altmetrics of a paper, but it means that people know where to go to find the information that you're talking about. Hashtags are really important, and I'll go into that a bit more as well about why hashtags are important. But also, I like Twitter because it allows you to explain your research in very short, simple language. And that is the best way to communicate, especially if you want to communicate to your lay audience. If you can say what you're researching in a nice, simple tweet, it communicates it in a way that people will find more engaging. You also don't want to have too many hashtags. If the tweet is primarily hashtags, it can just be a bit boring. So what is the point of hashtags? If you've never used a platform like this, then you might be like, why would I bother? You think about it like the keywords on a paper. So it's the way of saying, if you are interested in this, then this is for you. So for example, if I wanted to post about my most recent paper, I would look at what are the key themes in it. And again, it might be brain stimulation, stroke research or rehabilitation. And I would pick the key hashtags and post with those. It's also great if you are not talking about your research, but you have something that you just want to connect with the wider community. Think about what hashtags would be good for that. So as a PhD student and as someone who identifies as an ECR, I use a lot of hashtags like PhD chat or ECR chat because it allows me to connect with people with similar experiences who might have some advice to share with me. If I'm at a conference, I make sure that I know that conference hashtag and I not only follow it, but I use it with everything that I post. And that way I can talk to other people who are at the conference with me. Again, like I said, don't go crazy. Keep to probably 3 to 4 hashtags per post so you know which ones are working, and make sure you follow the ones that you're interested in as well, because that's the best way to see research that you might find beneficial and useful. I like to use a combination of Twitter and Google Scholar to help me network at conferences. Now, I get a lot of people asking, you know, especially if you're early into your PhD or early into your career, I need to network because I need to further my career opportunities, but I'm too shy or I don't know how to do it. Using a combination of Twitter and Google Scholar kind of makes it a bit easier and takes the edge off for you. So what my general pattern is before a conference is I get the conference program and I find who is talking about research that's relevant to my interests and who are the people that I would really like to talk to and network with throughout the conference. Once I've found them, I have a look and I see if they have a Twitter account and I look them up on Google Scholar. This way I'm kind of prepared because I can see, okay, this person is researching all of these things that I'm interested in, and I can see or even read the articles, so I have something to talk to them about. I can see what they're doing on Twitter throughout the conference, and I can see, you know, if they're tweeting about their presentation or anything like that, I know and I'm prepared. It's kind of like having a foot in the door, so that if you do follow them and start interacting with them before the conference, when you actually meet them or see them in real life, you kind of have an introductory bit. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a conference and someone comes up to me and goes, oh, I know you, you're on Twitter, and it's a nice, gentle way of talking to someone. The next thing that is very important to keep in mind is online etiquette. So this extends beyond Twitter to all online mediums. But I always use the example of, again, thinking about the person that you want to present to employers or at a conference, be that person in any online thing. So you don't, a lot of people can find it easier to hide behind a keyboard and think that they can be braver and say all sorts of things, but you still want to be the person that you want employers to see and you want to present to the world professionally. There's always going to be trolls or people who argue with you using online things. I find the best strategy is to not engage or block people who are being disruptive and upsetting. And yeah, one hint is that if you do use a trending hashtag, you are more likely to experience trolling. It's pretty rare. I have never had a trolling experience on Twitter. However, I will show you one example just to be aware. This happened probably about a year or so ago, where someone had posted about reviewing a systematic review, and they thought, well, it didn't have a meta-analysis and that's not good enough. So someone else commented and said, I've recently written a blog about this, and actually a systematic review doesn't need a meta-analysis. This woman received these private messages from a well-respected academic who she didn't share who this person was, which I respect. But the messages were quite offensive and a bit inappropriate, I would say. So this woman actually shared the messages, and within 24 hours, it had already been seen and retweeted a lot. So something like this can happen, and it might be surprising who feels more confident to send a message like this on an online platform. I think you need to be aware when using them that this can happen. It's outside of the norm, and how you handle it also speaks to you professionally. So you need to make sure that you can handle it in the best way possible as well. Do you need to download an app for Twitter? Yes, it can be used on a computer, but I highly recommend using it through the app. It's a lot easier. If you do want a successful Twitter account, you do need to dedicate time to it. So I recommend 10 minutes a day. I usually do it in the morning. So I'll be having a cup of coffee and I'll just go through my Twitter account before I get started. What do I get out of it? A lot. I hope I've made that very clear, is that there's a lot that you can get out of Twitter from helping your career professionally by furthering the impact of your research, but also through the connectedness and the way that you can communicate with other researchers and network with people as well. And in terms of your privacy, keeping it professional, keeping in mind that you are presenting the professional part of yourself and interacting with others professionally. Now, Zoom. I think, we're all on Zoom right now, and thanks to COVID, I'm sure that we've all been spending a lot of time on Zoom. There are a few things that you may not even know about Zoom, and one piece of advice that I would give you is, if you are new to Zoom and you still are working out its functionality, create a meeting with yourself. That's something you can do, where you just start a meeting and play around. Have a look at the different buttons and the different features that are available. You'd be surprised how many things that Zoom can actually do and how you can enhance your meeting experiences. So this is a screenshot of me looking very dorky, but just to show you in the view here, there's so many different options, especially if you're looking at the share screen. So if I was to click share screen, I get a whole heap of options of different documents that are up there. If I click one of these, then that is all that I'm sharing. I can't share anything else. If I click screen, I share my screen and whatever is on there. You can also click whiteboard, which I find really useful for meetings, where you've got all of these different functionalities, different things that you can do. I think that's one thing that I miss working from home and being in meetings, is having like a whiteboard where we can talk about ideas and stuff. So Zoom has implemented this feature to make that a bit easier. And if you have something on the whiteboard that is really relevant, you can save it and keep it for extra, like for future meetings or whatever you need. So my biggest take home for Zoom that I want you all to have is to go and just play with it and look at the different functions of it. You can also share videos with sound using Zoom, and it's a lot better than other applications to do that. You can, there's obviously all the fun features, which I'm sure people have found, like filters or virtual backgrounds, but there's a lot of things on Zoom that will enhance your online meeting experiences as well. Now, Slack, which is a very important platform. Slack is something that people feel a bit hesitant about using, I guess because they don't see the need for it. But Slack, I think, is something that will become more and more used as the years go by. It's an online workspace, and it's basically to help move on from keeping your research-based conversations or work-based conversations just in your email inbox. So often when you're having a conversation via email about something, the emails can get a little bit out of control. Your inbox gets a bit flooded, and it's hard to find what you're looking for. Slack is a way of communicating in an organized manner, so you can organize it by topic and go back to things with ease. Where you can also create shared to-do lists, which as a group you can keep up to date, and share documents and different resources with ease. Now, for anyone wanting to use Slack, there are so many online resources to help you learn how to use it. I would highly recommend, as a starting point, on the Slack training site, which I can share after this, there are some amazing training videos. These two are I guess the best to watch to understand why Slack is a really important and really good resource to be using for research communication within your team. So have a look on here, have a look at the Slack website for a whole heap of different tips and tricks. I'm going to give you a very quick overview of what Slack looks like. So basically you'll create a workspace. The Manrina and Anne-Marie are going to talk to this a lot more than I will about the ABSS Slack workspace. But if I was to log into here, or whichever workspace you're thinking of, you'll see something similar to this, where you'll have this sidebar with different channels and different options for you. You can go into a channel which is like a conversation topic, and there'll be a thread of messages of different things to do with that topic. There's also a chat area within it where you can even use your own chat to yourself as a way of keeping a to-do list, or you can talk to other people who are in the workspace individually. It's also like a feedback that I get a lot is that Slack is not intuitive. I do think that it's something that takes a little while to learn and a little bit of patience, but it's got a lot of features that make it really user-friendly, such as Slackbot, which is an automated help system within there. So whenever you're struggling with anything, Slackbot is able to help you, and it often does pop up, kind of like how Word used to have that annoying little paperclip. This is a much nicer way, but it comes up with little hints and tips or ways to use this better for you. You can also integrate a lot of different things that we use day to day into one productive space. So within Slack, you can add in Zoom, you can add in your calendars, Trello. If you use Trello to keep track of shared to-do lists, Trello can be incorporated in here as well. The functionality of this website is huge, and the possibilities for it is huge as well. If you're intimidated by it, my biggest advice is to just play around with it. Just spend a little bit of time getting to know it, and you'll probably become addicted in no time. So there's so many other things that I could have talked about today, but I really wanted to keep it condensed so that we had time for questions and things like that. But I do want to tell you that this is something, using online things to communicate and social media, things like that in research, this is just kind of, we're at the starting point, and it's going to become more and more. There's so many different ways that we can use different things, and there's so many different things that I didn't talk about, like having a research blog, YouTube channel, podcast, even, believe it or not, TikTok is a 30-second video platform that's now being used for fast communication of research. Things like Mendeley, which is like an online EndNote, which can also be used to measure citation indices. The Conversation is an amazing newsletter and website which can lead to media attention for research articles, which is nice. If you don't know about The Conversation, definitely look into it. Microsoft Teams. Basically, this just keeps, the list keeps growing, and technology, as technology advances, so do our needs. So my biggest advice would be to keep up to date with what's going on. Don't be afraid of technology. Don't be afraid of these online things. Try it, play around with it until you figure it out. And if something is not beneficial for you, if you start a Twitter account, for example, and you don't feel how I feel, and you don't feel like you're getting anything out of it, then it's not for you, and you don't need to worry about it. I would suggest having fun with it and just trying things. One thing that I highly recommend is an ebook called The 30-Day Impact Challenge by Stacey Conkill. It's a little bit outdated now. It was a few years ago. However, what she does is, for over 30 days, shows different ways of furthering your research impact and communication, so that you can get a little bit of a taste of each of these different things and see what works for you. I'll be consistently sharing resources with the ABSS community, and I'm also here for any questions. So I just want to thank you all for your attention in this, and to hand over to Nigel, who I think is going to let me know if people do have questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gemma. That was really great. I certainly Certainly learned a lot from that. It's a big space, the online community, and there's a lot of really fantastic tools that are constantly being made available. But it is tricky sometimes to stay on top of them. Definitely. So that was really fantastic. Fantastic. Now, if anyone has any questions, there's a Q&A button down on the bottom of the screen there. So please pop any in there, and we can get to those. Just while we're waiting for people to warm up a little bit, there was a point made by Kate Hoy during the talk that in regards to LinkedIn. So Kate mentioned that LinkedIn can also be good to show thought leadership in your area, for example, through blog sharing, stories, etc. I thought that was quite a good point.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. And I think if you are actively using LinkedIn, then the news feed within LinkedIn is great for that as well. So yeah, sharing any blog posts, things like that. Having an active blog in science is a big area as well.
Right. Just one question, and I guess or question/comment that I thought maybe you could expand on a little bit. Something that I've seen Twitter used quite well for is in terms of, you know, if a paper's released, giving a little short almost overview of the paper. I wonder if you could just maybe talk a little bit about that and how that can be useful and
yeah, definitely. Yeah, so Twitter is great to announce when you have recently published or anything that's new in your research group. When you are posting about a recent publication, there's a few key things that I will recommend, and that is, one, always link to the paper. Two, make sure, like I said, you use those strategic hashtags. So really think through what are the communities that are going to be interested in this, and use the hashtags that will highlight the paper to them. And then I often see people wasting a tweet because you've got such short numbers of characters. They'll put in the entire title of the paper. Whereas if you put the link in, it's going to have the title and the link anyway. People are going to figure that out. That's not the key thing. The key thing is grabbing people's attention. So what is the take-home message? What is the thing that you want to communicate, and say it as concisely as possible. If you do want to get into more detail about the paper, respond to yourself. So you can start a Twitter thread by responding to yourself, and you can describe, you know, we were the first people that used this particular methodology, or we've described this type of thing. And that's fine, but make sure, yeah, you're keeping it concise, you're linking to your paper, and you're using strategic hashtags.
Right. Okay, so we've just had a question come through that is somewhat related to that point, I think. So it says, thanks, Gemma. What about archive repositories such as PsycArchive? Is it helpful to post it there while it is under review, or wait till it is published and then tweet, or both?
So again, this is entirely up to you. I love preprints. Some journals love preprints, some journals do not. I like the idea of getting people's attention by releasing a preprint while your paper's under review somewhere, because it does start the conversation, and you're going to get more people downloading your paper because they've already kind of had a taste for it, and they're like, yes, this is the interesting thing, I'm going to get to that paper as soon as it comes out. So I'm personally a huge advocate for posting a preprint and then putting up the full text when that comes out. However, preprints are a controversial area. I get asked a lot about these. So be careful. Make sure that you check the journal that you have submitted to. Make sure you check their guidelines in case they have any embargo about releasing anything on media or anything like that before you get the actual publication. So I would say, in a short answer, yes, but be careful.
Excellent. And I think it's worth pointing out that a lot of preprint servers now link into your published articles once they're published as well. So
exactly.
Just because it's up there on a preprint server doesn't mean it's not going to be some linking into your actual published work from there, which is quite good. Cool. We've got another question here from Tapa. So Tapa says, thank you for a wonderful presentation. It was very informative. I'm curious on what your thoughts are with regard to using stories to talk about, promote your research. I know Facebook and Instagram offer this feature. Do you have any experience with this approach to engage your audience?
Yeah, so the nice thing about stories, again, is that they're usually time limited. So you've got to keep it very concise. It's also nice and a nice visual way. People always connect, like at the end of the day, we're all humans, we connect well with other people, and watching someone talk about something, you know, having this video of me talking to you right now would be a lot more interesting than if we just had a blank screen and you could hear, you know, read what I'm talking about. So I do think that there is benefit to doing that. However, like you say, it's Facebook and Instagram that seem to be using this type of feature. Twitter doesn't really have anything similar yet. I don't know if that's something that they are working on. So if you were going to do that, you would want to have the Facebook account as your professional, the Instagram account as your professional account, and to use it with purpose, I guess. You know, you've got, I think it's like 15 seconds to get the message across. So you're going to want to be prepared. The other thing similar to the stories is the live feature. So going live on Facebook and Instagram. Same thing. It can be really interesting and get a lot of interest from people. But you do want to be prepared. You don't want to get up there unprepared and just talk off the top of your head. It's similar to me giving this talk today. I needed to make sure that I was prepared for what I wanted to talk about. So I think there's definitely benefit to using those type of features, but I think, yeah, it depends on what your goal is. It doesn't make a difference with altmetrics, the way that you share it. The only thing would be if you were using stories or Instagram Live, obviously you're not going to have the link there. You'd have to put a link to a paper after, and then that increases altmetrics. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Right. If anyone has follow-up questions as well, please feel free to post them and I'll pass them on. We don't have any other questions at the moment. As Tava just said, yes, it does answer his question, so that's good. Okay, no other questions at the moment. If anyone has anything that they would like to ask Gemma, please pop it on now. Just, I guess, one other question regarding Slack from me. So, I've sort of been interested in potentially trying Slack out for a little while, but I guess I've tried a couple of other different platforms, you know, that they've kind of worked. What would be your sort of your top 3 tips for using Slack effectively and actually getting the most out of it, I suppose?
Okay, so my top 3 first would be play with it. So play with it, press buttons, see what they do. The only way that you're going to get anything out of using a new platform like that is by experiencing it and seeing if it is doing what you want. So first of all, get it up and running and play with it and see if it's working for you. Secondly, like I said, Slack has so much tips and tricks out there. So have a look at what different people are suggesting that they use it for, and you'll be surprised with how many things that Slack can do. And I guess tip number 3 would be, for me personally, when you move to Slack, keep your workspaces dedicated to what they're supposed to be. For example, I think the first one that a lot of people might experience will be once the ABSS one is launched, they'll start with that. So this is where it's ABSS and this is what you're using it for. I'm guessing a lot of people will then be addicted and will move on to using it for maybe their research team or personal research. In that case, you keep it for that, and you'll notice shift going from a very full email inbox that usually gets clogged up with different articles or versions of documents to a much more organized way of having these conversations and finding those documents. So I think those would be the top 3. So play with it, learn about it, and keep it organized and contained to what you want to use it for.
Great. Excellent. I'll have to give it a shot.
Give it a go.
Okay, we've got another question here. So, is it all right to cold follow researchers who work with you, whose work you might have only read about and not met personally? Thinking of doing a mass follow after this question.
Yeah, I'm assuming that is a Twitter question, but I guess it applies to most things, and I would say yes. I mean, the whole point of Twitter is to network and connect with other people. I cold follow people all the time, especially, like I said, before a conference. I find it really nice to just follow different people that I might want to connect with throughout the conference. Chances are, if you have a Twitter account, I'm probably already cold following you, even though I've never met you before. And like I said, I get it a lot too. Because I've done the social media for like ACNS for such a long time, whenever I'm at the conference, I get people constantly coming up to me saying, oh, I know you from Twitter. And it's all cold follows, but it leads to genuine connection and genuine, I guess, ways to communicate about your research. So I'm a huge advocate for the cold follow. What's the worst that can happen? They say no.
And you've got other supporters here as well. Someone else has also written through saying that they agree that yes, definitely. and I think that the questioner said, yes, that's great to know. And also getting some feedback back through about Slack being really useful as well from some other people who have implemented that and found it really, really useful. So, and another one through as well here from Claire Bradley saying, just to comment on Slack, finding it very practical as a lab-wide communication platform, especially in COVID terms. Lots of science chats and documents, highly recommend it. So I think, yeah, it looks like it's a good option.
Great.
Okay. Any other comments or questions or thoughts or experiences that other people have had? Another question has just come through about Twitter. So I had a question about Twitter. How do you make hashtag for something new when the most relevant hashtag you can think of is already picked for something else?
That's a good one. So I guess what this person is asking is, if, for example, I wanted to use the hashtag ABSS, which I do a lot using the account here, there are other people that use it. In fact, I think we got tagged recently in a bird watching society. So I'm assuming that other people are using ABSS for different things. A way around that is to, like when you're picking a username for something, is to add something to it. So I might do ABSS 2020 or ABSS webinar. So it just gives it something that makes it a little bit more original. Alternatively, it's not the end of the world if someone else is using a hashtag. You can differentiate between hashtags. So, for example, if people were looking for ABSS instead of the Birdwatching Society, they can go through the hashtags and figure out, which one's which. The other way that you can make sure that people know what you're referring to is having hashtags together that would make sense. So for example, I would do hashtag ABSS and then my next hashtag would be brain stimulation or something along those lines, so that the two together would make it obvious about what the topic is. I hope that helps. Creating a new tag is a difficult one. But yeah, you just need to be a bit creative and original and think of a way to make it more relevant to what you want. Great.
Right. That was from Anna. She says, perfect. Thank you, Gemma. So that's answered that question. Fantastic. Are there any other last minute questions or comments that anyone would like to make? Okay, I think that's oh, here we go. Just another one in from Kirsten Gainsford. So if you're managing a group Twitter, do you have any tips on managing them or increasing followers? That's a good one.
Yeah,
actually.
That is a good one. So yeah, for example, I took over the ACNS Twitter account, which is obviously a group account, in 2017. And prior to that, they didn't, it wasn't a very active account. They only had about 30 followers. So flash forward to now, and we've got well over 1,000 followers, and it's a very active account. And the way that I was able to do that is target the people that I'm following. So you don't just want a mass following. That's not very useful for you. You want a following of real people, and you don't want to attract bots and things like that. You want people who are genuinely going to be interested in what you're posting. So the way that you do that is curate who you're following. You make sure that you follow accounts that are relevant to what your Twitter is about, and keep your account active. So you make sure, like I said, I spend 10 minutes a day on the Twitter accounts that I'm currently managing, which I often do in the morning. I'll have my cup of coffee and I'll sit there with my Twitter and go through the feed, and I'll interact with ones that are relevant to my Twitter group. So if I know people who post a lot about, for example, with the ABSS one, I'll make sure I go through people who are posting about brain stimulation. If it's relevant to the society, I'll retweet it. If anyone tags the account in something, I make sure I interact back. And it's little things like that, which it's slow and steady, but that's the best way to increase your following over time. Now, if you are time poor and you're concerned about dedicating a day, and you're concerned about, keeping your account active with all the time constraints, you can use online programs to help you automate your posts. So, you'll make a schedule of when they post this or whatever. The only thing that I would say is that's a better feature to use when you have an established Twitter account. But when you are just starting a Twitter account, it is better to be more personalized and to just put a little bit more at that start. Just helps you get some real followers as opposed to attracting bots and things.
Fantastic. And just quickly, could you maybe just explain what bots are and how they work and why they're bad?
So, I mean, not all bots are bad. There are some bots that you'll see out there, like a systematic review bot, which will literally retweet anything to do with a systematic review. But mostly bots are like spam or fake accounts, things like that. If you get a huge increase in fake accounts following you, then it can just be a bit of a disaster. You get tagged in things you don't want to be tagged in. You're not reaching the people that you want to reach. So it's either automated fake accounts or it's people doing spam accounts, and it's not what you want for your research communication. They're kind of obvious when you get a bot attacking you trying to follow your feed, because it's not like they're posting anything relevant to what you're posting about. It'll be something silly or something that you don't want. You can usually just block them, and you'll only notice them if you are using a very trending hashtag or commenting on Donald Trump's tweets or something like that, where you'll see a lot more of these things. But yeah, like I said, not all bots are bad. Some bots are interesting. I follow Systematic Review Bot just to keep up to date with different things to do with systematic reviews. So yeah.
Right. Excellent. Okay, well, I think we'll move on to the next section. So thank you very much, Gemma. I think that was really fantastic, and I think the interaction that we've had following your talk is evidence of how much interest there is and how important it is to learn about these online tools. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.